Well, hey, you, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Hippie Podcast. I'm your host, Michaela, and I have all three corgis with me today. So we have Willie, Tank, and Daisy co hosting. And it's funny because I actually had this week's episode recorded. And today, when I got home from grabbing coffee and running a few errands, I thought, you know what? I want to re record this week's episode because there's more to the story. And I think there's a really important piece to the story because what I recorded last week was strictly about why I decided, as quote unquote, the perfect candidate to not do Ozempic. And what I really I will talk about that. And depending on how, I don't have anything scripted today. I originally had an outline and I thought I just need to get on here and talk. And I might do another episode specifically why I didn't do Ozempic. It might come out here. I really don't know. What I really wanted to shift the intention of this episode today is weight gain, body image stuff in correlation to sexual assault, because that really feels like what needs to come first, because really that was the Kickstarter which led to my decision to not do Ozempic. And I feel like it'll come out in this episode, but if it doesn't, I will do another episode specifically as to why I didn't do Ozempic. I may still air the episode. Nah, no, I'm not. I'll delete the episode I recorded and then just post this one and maybe re-record. So that's me thinking out loud as I do. I don't really have anything other than I think we're just going to get into the story. And why I specifically decided to re-record is because yesterday I am currently taking an intuition class. For those of you that don't know and haven't been following me on Instagram, I did the 2 MDMA sessions in September of 2021, and my intuitive, some people would call psychic gifts, came back on full swing. And I didn't know what to do with them. It was very overwhelming to have. And now along my journey, I am going to do a full episode on just my intuitive gifts. I think my friend Kristen is going to come on and walk me through. I can't tell you the episode name. I'm pretty stoked about the episode name, but I'm going to do a full episode about that and my experience with that. The short version of the story is when they came back on, it was a lot. Just imagine having shut this noise. It's not noise, but that's what it seemed like when it first came back on. This noise, imagine having shut that down, and then all of a sudden, that's my dominant way of receiving through my sixth sense is hearing, like auditory. And so imagine just being able to hear sometimes people's thoughts and then the spoken words of loved ones that have crossed. And then it was a whole thing. And so it was very overwhelming. I didn't know what to do with it. So I've been taking classes to learn how to train these gifts better, to learn how to use them better, to shield myself and all of these things. And then the other piece of it is I really have wanted to become what people would call a medical medium for a long time. I think the way that we're going to approach healthcare is shifting. And I've always wanted to be able to kind of scan the body with my own sixth sense, like an MRI, and be able to pick up on things and the emotional links to them. And all of that stuff is super, super fascinating to me. And I think that's where we are mistaken about sixth sense gifts, is that you're stuck with the one you have. It is what it is, but that's not true at all. You can train, you can develop. And so that's what I've been doing. So I was in class yesterday in one of the trainings that I'm doing for the intuitive gifts that I have. And part of the work is getting to the emotional root causes of things. The way I describe it is childhood trauma is anything that disconnects us from ourselves, and it starts to cause this callus that separates us from our authentic self, from our intuitive gifts, all of these things. And then trauma work is the pumice stone that takes off the callus so that we can reconnect to God, our true selves, the universe, gifts, whatever you want to call that. And so a lot of times there's two pieces of it. There's actually training, having the skills to develop this stuff. And then there's also removing the calluses. So yesterday was more of a remove the callus day. And the callus that came up was stuff tied to the sexual abuse that I experienced as a kid. which really inspired the episode and the change of tone as far as, no, we really need to start talking about this, because understanding this made one major shift for me, that my body is not fighting against me. My body doesn't hate me. My body is not at war with me. My body is trying to protect, save, and help me. And once I deeply understood the correlation to gaining weight, sexual abuse, sexual assault, I totally shifted my perception of the human body. Because until then, I very much was of the belief of, my body hates me, my body wants me to be fat, my body makes me have all these cravings to make me even fatter. Like, it was just so fueled with self-hatred. And so before we really get into why I decided not to do Ozempic, the energetic perspective of Ozempic, which was the emotional slash energetic slash spiritual perspective on Ozempic. That was my intention with the last episode. I think I am going to still, again, I'm thinking out loud. I think I am just going to do an episode. I am going to just do an episode of that by itself. And it's like part A and part B. This is the part A of the story that led me to even having that, is because understanding this as to why my body started gaining weight led me to not make the decision to take Ozempic, because I knew it wasn't getting to the root cause. So the crazy thing is, I read this book called The Gabriel Method. I actually still highly recommend it. John Gabriel, he doesn't have it anymore. He had this evening meditation to like fall asleep to. It was like a hypnosis a little bit. He doesn't have it anymore. And it was something that I used nightly for a really long time. And that led me to reading his book, because he had just a very loving, caring, and soft approach to things. I'll give you a little bit of his backstory. He was supposed to be on the plane that crashed into, I believe on 9/11, there was a plane that went to DC. I was like 5 when it happened, so I actually don't really remember a ton of it. He was supposed to be on one of the planes that crashed. He, I believe, overslept, missed the plane, obviously was beating himself up about it until he finds out that the plane he was supposed to be on, no one survived. So really felt like God had given him a second chance at life. And he, at the time, I believe, was over 400 pounds, and really started getting to the root cause of how this happened, why this happened, and could get back to the root of when his body started putting on weight. Essentially, when the body, there's different reasons, but for him, his body was trying to protect himself. He'd already grown as tall as he could. So the only other way to grow, quote unquote, and become more of a threat, quote unquote, again, our subconscious mind, aka the body, its primary job is to keep us safe and alive. So if it can't get bigger, like, essentially what the body was doing for him was making him an elephant so that he couldn't get attacked, right? Like, elephants aren't really they're not going to outrun something. They're not really going to outfight something. However, they are so big, things in the wild just don't really mess with them. So his body was trying to do the same thing. So read his book. I start understanding this. And then the crazy thing is, if you go look at and this was kind of in my experience with sexual assault, I do not remember when I was getting molested by my babysitter son. I have one vivid memory from doing MDMA sessions. If you go listen to my second MDMA trip report on the podcast, the only reason I knew that it happened more than once was because the MDMA showed me. And I really think the reason the MDMA has this intelligence of its own, and I think the reason the MDMA even showed that to me in the first place is because I was just doubting it. I wasn't even talking about it because, like, in my mind, it was one time, it was not a big deal. Why talk about it? Like, when I would talk about the sexual assaults I experienced, I would only talk about it with the horse trainer, which happened when I was 12. And so I think one of the reasons the MDMA, there's twofold reasons. One was so I would talk about it. So I would believe myself even more. And then the other one, I had a lot of regrets about how it was handled, the court situation, all of that. And so that really gave me a sense of peace about why we went to court. And that's another story for another day. So those two reasons, but the only reason now since all of that I've been able to kind of label down a time frame is because you can watch my school picture. You can look at my school pictures and see and watch my body changing in real time. So yesterday when I'm in class, what comes up with the callus removal is this is the belief, like driving the image that I am currently presenting to the world, the image being what I look like, how I present myself, how I act towards the world, like that whole thing, the belief driving all of that is if I look like this won't happen again. So if I'm overweight, if I act more masculine, if I shield myself, if I hide myself, if I play as small as possible, this won't happen again, meaning the sexual assaults, the sexual abuse. And then even more than that is when I was going through the sexual assaults when I was 12, I started losing a ton of weight. And that summer, I think from June to September, I lost 25 or 30 pounds. I'm 5'3". So 25 to 30 pounds losing and gaining shows up very quickly on 5'3" because it doesn't really have much place to go other than out. And so when you lose it, it's more noticeable. 10 pounds on someone shorter is a lot more noticeable than 10 pounds on someone taller. So it was very noticeable. Everyone was noticing, including the horse trainer. His pseudonym in the book is Todd. So I tend to just use Todd, the book that I wrote. And so I tend to just use Todd when I talk about him because it's pseudonyms and it's simple for me. And so when I was going through the experience with Todd, he was commenting on how much more shapely I was getting and how curvy I was getting and all of these things. So I'm losing weight. This is this weird moment in time where I'm losing weight. I'm getting compliments that I've never gotten before. And I don't care what anybody says, but we all like getting compliments about looking good. Ideally, we want to be validating and getting those from ourselves. That's another story for another day. However, when you're 12, I'm going from 6th grade into 7th grade. So at that point, we're getting more into boys. We're starting to care more about our appearance. And so, yeah, as effed up as it was, I'm getting all these compliments, not just from Todd, but from other people about how good I'm looking. And no one at this point, except for Todd, myself, and then my friend, knew what was going on. So no one knows the reason I'm losing weight is because I'm not doing good. Like, I'm just not doing good. And it was weird. Like what I call it is it was a mind pretzel because I'm getting these compliments. I'm getting assaulted. I'm sexually assaulted by this extremely perverted man. And so now the weight is even more like intertwined in this web of sexual assault and if I sit with it was from my perspective now, and I don't like to play with the past as far as, well, if I would, I do have a bad habit of playing with the past in other situations, but that is another thing we will talk about another day. But I, I feel it would have progressed anyway. But the subconscious mind, something happens, it makes a connection. Something happened, it makes a connection. Like, unless we consciously stop and discern it, and when I'm in fight or flight, essentially the whole summer, I'm obviously not stopping to discern, and I'm 12. My brain's not even fully developed. So I'm not stopping to discern, is the weight correlated with the escalation of the assaults? I'm not stopping to discern that. Like I said, I feel like it would have escalated if I would have kept putting on weight, or if I would have started putting on weight, or if I would have stayed the same. I feel like just with the kind of person he is, it would have escalated anyway. However, in my subconscious, the thinner I get, the worse it's getting. Like, that's the connection that was made because the assaults very much picked up over the summer. So it went, and that my detective later explained to me, the detective that was on my case, that is a very common, yeah, I'm gonna use the word common, grooming technique for, because that was what happened. He tried something, waited probably a week or two to see if I'd say anything. Then it happened again, and then waited some time before he did anything. And it went on like that until it was an everyday occurrence. But that is what my detective told me, is that is a very common grooming technique. On it does two things to the child or the target. One, like I said, he's checking to see, am I going to say anything? And then two, it actually makes it more confusing for the child. And this is like where I started with the quote unquote dementia theory, because in my head, if he was actually a pervert, he would have started from the get go. He would have done this every day. And so this is like the stories we're told. We're not really taught that almost all have predators that groom children. They have techniques. It's way more common to get molested by somebody you know, so that they can groom you, so that you are less likely to tell. And I think there's this common misconception that the most common sexual assaults are by like some random stranger. It happens one time. Like, no, it's not true at all. And so it was very much a technique of confusing me even more. And so that was, if you read my book, The Barn of Colfax Lane, that was really during the time where I was telling myself he had dementia, he had just lost his wife, he's not actually a pervert, all of these things. And then meanwhile, I'm losing weight because I'm walking on eggshells essentially all the time. And so, yeah, it was just very confusing, very much more tied into this confusion of weight. And yeah, yeah, I think, yeah, it's just very, when I look back into that time, it was just very confusing. And then on top of, I'd always wanted to have a certain body image, I'd always wanted to be thin. And so I'm going through these sexual assaults, I'm losing weight that I've wanted to lose for years. And yet there's this part of me that is wanting to put weight back on, like subconsciously, that is wanting to put weight back on because I'm terrified. So, or not terrified was the wrong word, but I'm trying to protect myself. So, yeah. So, yesterday, that I asked the person that I was working with, I said, what emotion is connected to all this? Because I was honestly, and this is crazy for me to say, again, this is what inspired today's episode. As crazy as this is for me to say, I was not expecting for the sexual assault thing to come up, especially specifically with Todd and with my babysitter son. I don't know that I've gave him a pseudonym yet. I have not. He'll have a pseudonym in the second book, but I I tend to just refer to him as my babysitter son because that's like a way to not say any names. I Yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy to say. I just was not expecting that to come up, but now having gone through that yesterday, it's so obvious. I think the story I've told myself is, and this is subconscious, right? I'm not doing this on purpose. I'm not saying that, like, I genuinely from my conscious mind thought that I'd healed. I knew I hadn't consciously. I knew I had not healed everything that I needed to heal around this. I honestly didn't think I could heal any more of this until I got into a relationship. Like, I honestly thought that the rest of the healing that I had to do was going to be in and through a relationship, as far as some I still have some weird things about like intimacy and if people approach me in certain directions. I still have some weird things with that I've been working through. So I honestly thought, and that I'm like, you can't really practice that on your own, like I can't, you know. And so that was the healing that I thought I had left to do, was things as far as just the couple people that I have dated in the past, it gets, the more I trust them, the more safer I feel around them, like the easier it gets. And yet there is still, but that this is like, so why it feels so obvious now, because with both the two people that I've dated, there hits a certain point where I start these patterns. I've been really mindful about not saying self-sabotage. These like old patterns and old neural pathways start to take over to keep me safe. And then I go back into hiding. I'm like, yep, we're done. Goodbye. I'm going to be single the rest of my life. This was fun. This was fun. Adios. Good luck. See you in the next lifetime. And so it's that. Like when I'm visualizing it, it's like this pendulum in a weird way, or not even a pendulum, but this like game of tug of war keeping me in between two very specific lines. And if I get too far over one line, it pulls me back. And if I get too far over the other line, it pulls me back. And that's the block, quote unquote, that I need to work on, is the fact that there is lines in which I have to play tug of war between. That's not how life is. You don't have to play tug of war between two lines to live your life. You can just go live your life. And yeah. So I'm still actually just like, oh crap, this is it. And so yesterday, when I asked the girl I was working with what the emotion was, because like I said, I knew this was a thing, but not to the extent that we worked on yesterday in class. And um what she was picking up on, and I don't think she's wrong, is anger. And I've worked on quite a bit of anger, actually, but not around this. Because she said, this might bring up, one of the exercises she recommended was writing a letter to this person, and 2 letters essentially, not to send, just as an exercise. One letter of unfiltered, just whatever I need to say, just go ahead and say it. And then the second one, she said she recommended only when I'm ready, a forgiveness letter. And what's kind of interesting is I have wrote the forgiveness letters. But when I was sitting with it yesterday, I haven't wrote the anger letter, because I don't think I've let myself be fully angry about it. Because even when she said, well, this might bring up some stuff, I thought about it. I've cried over certain things around the sexual assault, but I don't know that I've ever cried or been angry specifically about the sexual assault, about what the I have a really, see, even I'm observing myself now, like I have a really hard time saying like what he did to me. And it's like, well, yeah, he did. I mean, he did. You can read my book. Like he did certain actions to me, but I don't know. I should probably go work on that with a therapist or something. I even have just a hard time saying that, because I guess now that I'm sitting with it, like it's the acknowledgement that it happened. Like there's a part of me that wants to pretend like it never happened, or pretend like the girl, and this is even the crazy thing, is I thought I worked through so much of this when I was writing the book, and I think I allowed myself to work on it to write the book. But then, you kind of go back to like, okay, we're good. I just, there's a part of me that doesn't want to admit that it happened, because I also have to admit that there might be some permanent damage done. And in avoidance of all of that, it just, I think that is the feeling that I am trying to avoid. And in the third book, or in the second book, what I kick off with is because I remember that feeling of brokenness. I remember that feeling of damagedness, and I never wanted to feel that way again. But instead of working through it, it was just this covering up. It was this, we're just going to make the best that I can. And I have in certain areas of my life, but then in other areas of my life, I avoid it like the plague. And that's how I know that she's right. Like what she saw in my subconscious is correct, that this is still this big block that I have to address if I want to live the life that I want to live. You know, if I want to keep living my life the way that I'm living it, then yeah, okay, we don't got to address this. However, I'm at a place where I want to get to the next stage of my life. I want to have a partnership with a really amazing man, and I'm not going to be able to have that if this block is still there, because this block is creating certain neural pathways that I've tried it, and it just, like I said, when I get so far into a relationship, it takes over and then I back out essentially. And there's some other things too, but we'll get into the relationship stuff another day. But with all that being said, thank you for staying while I rambled on about that story, because I really needed to today. I really needed to just get that out. I hope that we can start to learn to have more compassion for ourselves as we continue to learn why the body is doing what it's doing. Because the messaging being pushed in the diet industry and the fitness industry, it is starting to shift, but predominantly for the last, I mean, I know for sure, I mean, I was born in 95, but during the 90s era, you know, if you're not, and even before then, because I feel like the older generations were definitely the thing with weight, man, I tell you, because even my grandma, who was born in the 20s, she's passed. She's been gone since I was 17, so like 12 years. She was weird about weight. I'm just going to go with weird. If you put on a pound, that woman would notice and call it out. So it's definitely been something that's plagued our culture for generations. But just going back to the 90s, you know, the low fat, what a lot of anti-aging doctors now call the diabesity phase. It was, if you're not losing weight, there is something wrong with you. You are broken. You don't have enough willpower. You're not trying hard enough. And of course, if we hear messaging like that and start believing the messaging like that, of course, we are going to start to hate ourselves. And here's the thing that I have told myself, because believe me, letting the self-hatred go and everything that comes with the self-hatred, the mean self-talk, the beating myself up, the being fueled by inadequacy, is hard for me to let go. Because here's the double-edged sword of it all. It fucking works, right? It has worked in very specific times when I have needed to push through something, when I have needed to bust like a project out and get it done. Guess what? The mean self-talk works. It's the whip that can get you going. But guess what? The whip cannot keep us going, because eventually we get whipped enough. I'm thinking of the movie The Prince of Egypt right now. Eventually you get whipped enough, you become so weak, you fall down, you go backwards. It doesn't work long term. And one of my favorite definitions of success is not just, this is from Brendon Burchard's High Performance Habits. It's not just getting success, it is maintaining and holding success over time. The whip can get us there, it cannot keep us there. And here was the message that I got one day is, Michaela, if this was working, you would be a billionaire by now. You'd be a best-selling author by now. Like, you would have, if the self-hatred, abuse, like talk, if all of that worked, all of your dreams would come true right now. All your dreams would be true right now. And guess what? They're not. So it's time to put this tool down and it's time to go get another tool. A hammer is a great tool, but if you built an entire house with a hammer, have fun. It's going to be a little rough. You're going to wish you had a chainsaw a couple times. Not a chainsaw. What is maybe a chainsaw? Um, a table saw. There we go. A table saw. You're going to wish you had a screwdriver at some point. You're going to wish you had a nail gun at some point. Yes, the hammer is great, but it's great in very specific circumstances. To build an entire house just using a hammer, going to be a little sore, and things are going to be, they're not going to look very good. There's going to be some things that you're going to walk by in that house here and like, interesting choice. Well, it was an interesting choice because they only used one tool to build the entire house. So anyway, I've always really liked that metaphor, but it's once I started to understand why my body, like, this was the perspective that I looked at it from, because as I start gaining weight, I'm getting shamed by the people around me. I don't know about you, but and I'm 5'6" at this point. Like, when you look at my school photos, I ended up doing 3 years of preschool because my birthday is September 13th. So it's like right after the school year started. The preschool I attended let me start early. So they let me start preschool when I was 2, knowing I would turn 3 in a couple weeks. They let my mom like bring me in, saw how I interacted with kids that were a little bit older than me. Cause like if I was too immature, they wouldn't have let me start, but I was mature enough to start with the kids. So I go to the younger preschool that there was 2 like ages in the preschool that I went to. So it was the Ladybugs and the Busy Bees. So I'm in Ladybugs when I'm 2 to 3. They let me go to the Busy Bees from 3 to 4. However, the elementary school would not let me start early. So then I had to repeat the second. I did 2 years of Busy Bees. So I repeated Busy Bees twice essentially. And from Busy Bee year 1 to Busy Bee year 2 to my kindergarten picture, you can see the changes in me. Like, it is very drastic. And then on top of that, my parents ended up splitting. You can see the biggest difference between Busy Bee year 1 to Busy Bee year 2. And then, um, yeah, you can really see a big difference. And even in Busy Bee, it's kind of, I didn't even think about this, but from Ladybugs to Busy Bee year 1, I'm wearing a dress. And then I quit wearing dresses, which is interesting. I didn't really think about that until now. Which makes, now knowing what I know, makes total sense. But you can see a big change, like just in my face, and like, it's weird. You can see the pain in my face. And that's what's like what I hope to bring to the compassion to ourselves, but also to adults, to children, because it's so common. And even I coached volleyball at the YMCA when I lived in LA for a little bit. It's so common to start beating kids up for gaining weight. And I'm not sorry for saying, I was about to say, I'm sorry for saying this, but I'm not. If a child is putting weight on, it is not the child's fault. It is not. Like, there's so much responsibility that belongs on the shoulders of parents, that parents place on the shoulders of children. And it just needs to stop. And that was like one of the things that even at that age, I'm getting hounded for my weight. And yet it's like, I'm not cooking. And meanwhile, I'm getting molested, and my body is trying to protect me. And so what I really saw within myself is my body protected me even when the adults around me did not. And that's how I could start to bridge the gap of allowing my body to become my friend and not my foe. Because when everyone around me failed me, my body did not. My body was doing her job. My body was trying to protect me with everything she could, and getting me to dress differently, and getting me to act differently, and getting me to put weight on. Like, the goal, like, it's so funny because this is not typically the goal, but to keep myself safe, like, okay, let's get less attractive because maybe he'll stop. Like, my body was literally throwing as much as she could just out. Like, I don't know, I'm like, when you're just like throwing spaghetti at the wall, like, just to see what works. Like, my body's just throwing all this stuff out, just trying to get this to stop because I was so freaking miserable. And so how could I not want to befriend someone who did all of that, something who did all of that just to love, save, and protect me, even when the people that were quote unquote responsible for me would not. And in this conversation of understanding how directly correlated weight gain and child abuse and different trauma is related, in that how we can start becoming friends with our body so that we can be on the same team. We both want the end result, and that's when this tug of war ends. The tug of war ends when we are truly on the same side. And as much as I have felt more compassion for my body and felt more love for my body, we are still not on the same team. But can you, like, let us just all imagine, like, instead of I'm trying to, shoot a goal, my body's trying to shoot a goal, like, we're both on the same team shooting at the same goal. And I really truly believe that weight loss can become easy then. But a lot of times we want to, and I am so guilty of this, we have something we want. So let's just, since we're going on the weight thing here, we want to lose 50 pounds, sure. And we want that 50 pounds to be gone tomorrow. And what we forget is in between 0 to 50 is 10, 20, 30. There's all these steps in between. We don't get to skip steps. Even if you get on a plane, if you're in Los Angeles going to New York, even if you get on a plane, you're like, well, I was in LA, I went straight to New York. Well, you had to fly over Kansas, didn't you? You probably also had to fly over Pennsylvania. You had to fly over Nevada. I don't know the actual track. You still had to go over certain steps. You had to go over certain states to get to the destination that you wanted to get to. We don't get to skip steps here. And when we do, guess what? We rebound backwards. And the first step of all of this that I've truly felt for a long time is just seeing how our body is not against us, but is for us and is with us. And I think that for me, that first step was understanding the correlation between how the body responds to trauma. And so, like I said, there's 2 books that I really recommend for this deeper understanding. One is The Body Keeps the Score, and the second one is The Gabriel Method. The Gabriel Method is a lot lighter read. It's a simpler read, it's a lighter read. It is more tied to weight loss. The Gabriel Method literally is a weight loss tool. And I have not read any of his material, but I really like the way Gabor Mate speaks. He's more, that I've heard, he's more like the correlation between ADHD and childhood trauma, but even just starting to understand these correlations and how these things are not random. We're taught, oh, you just have shoulder pain because you have shoulder pain. You just have back pain because you have back pain. Then why does everyone I meet with lower back pain have either anger issues, financial issues, or repressed childhood trauma? Tell me. Tell me. And people with shoulder pain, 9 times out of 10, are carrying a burden they are not meant to be carrying. The body is always giving us the answer. We just have to know how to listen to the clues that tell us the answer, that show us the answer. And we're just not taught that. So, yeah, I think that is all I have for today. That would be my goal for everyone here, is between now and next week. And next week I'll go deeper into, today was more just the sexual trauma direct correlation to weight gain. Next week I'm going to go specifically into body image issues, the shame that more of because it wasn't, yes, there was a sexual assault piece. There was also family shame, body image issues with the family, the different weight loss journeys I've been on. And then ultimately, I'll share why I decided not to do Ozempic. But I mean, spoiler alert, like what we've talked about today, the Ozempic's not going to heal my childhood trauma. So that was essentially why I didn't go on Ozempic, because the issue of my weight gain was not an Ozempic deficiency. It is at its core me not feeling safe being thin, because I don't want to be attractive, because in my subconscious mind, if I am attractive, I am a target. And if I am a target, well, we know the story. So that is why ultimately I didn't do Ozempic. So yeah, next week we'll go deeper into weight as a whole. Today was a therapy / venting day for me. So again, if you've made it this far, I really appreciate it. And also how I just really started to see that my body was my friend and not my foe. So anyway, thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Western Hippie Podcast. I would absolutely love if you could subscribe and leave a review. And then if you would like to join in on this conversation, if you would love to share your story, you can email me, Michaela@MichaelaMay.com, or find me on Instagram at Miss Michaela May. If you wish, you can remain anonymous, and I will, you can find me on Facebook too and send me a friend request. And I am active on Facebook, and send me a message that way too. And just share your weight journey. Again, I'm more than happy to keep you anonymous and just read your story on the podcast if you wish, or, share it on a story, or if you would like to, maybe come on here and talk about it, that's an option as well, because I think we need to talk about it more. And before I officially sign off, is start just getting curious about, when did you start gaining weight? Was there anything in your life that your body was protecting you from? And if so, what was it? And then just show some reverence of gratitude towards your body. Thank you for protecting me when no one else would. Thank you for trying to save me from this since I was a child and I couldn't run away. I couldn't drive away, but you were still trying to protect me in this way. So that is your action step if you have struggled with weight and weight gain. Look at when your body started to put on weight, what was going on during that time, and how can you show some gratitude towards your body. Again, thank you for listening to another episode of the Western Hippie Podcast. I'm your host, Michaela, here with Tank, Willie, and Daisy the Corgi. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will talk to you next week.